Yeah, I have enabled screen sharing for you.
Oh.
Okay, I think we can begin, Nogita.
Yeah, I think we can. It's exactly, it's 9:01. You can start. People will join by and by.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Welcome, everyone. I think this is the 35th, according to my calculation, it's the 35th session of Talking Films online. We are very happy to welcome Dr. Swaralipi Nandi to initiate discussion today on the film Bulbul. She suggested this film for us, and I think we've all watched it, and we're so glad, that you've asked us to watch this film, and we really look forward to the discussion on this film. Dr. Swaralipi Nandi,
Baba?
a PhD in English from Kent State University, Ohio. She's currently heading the Department of English at Loyola Academy Degree and PG College, Hyderabad. She's the editor of the book Spectacles of Blood, a study of masculinity in post-colonial cinema, in post-colonial films. And I think this film too, if it had come a few years earlier, would have figured in the discussion in your book. So thanks again, Swaralipi, for being part of the discussion today and moderating it. And over to you.
Thank you for this warm welcome, and I'm very privileged that I get to start the discussion. And I believe that many of us would have a lot of things to say about the film. So what I plan to do is just initiate and maybe speak about the broad tropes that are there, so that we can take our discussion from there and maybe go beyond that definitely. I also want to step in as the native informant because there are many references that are specifically Bengali, which I think would help if I give a little bit of context to them, the specifically folklorish cultural context to it. So that's what I plan to do. But I'm looking forward to an interactive session, vibrant discussion on many things that are happening in the film. So I came up with this film very strangely. I mean, I did not intend to watch the film per se. With the OTT things coming up, especially during the lockdown, I think we have moved away from traditional TV and cinema into OTT completely. And I chanced upon a review of the film in one of the papers. And the cover looked very interesting, and it was a very sketchy review. It did not give me a lot of details, but there were certain things that made me think of the film, and I thought I'll go and watch it. And I was quite fascinated by a lot of things that were happening in the film. Though, as I already mentioned to Dr. Nikhila also, that this is, we'd not call it as a perfect craft. There are many cliches that are there. Cinematically, we'd not call it a brilliant film per se. But there are many things that we can take from the film, and there are many things that are happening in the film, which are nuanced and which, for an informed viewer, could bring a lot. So that's what I plan to do today. I'll just broadly talk about some of the things that are happening here, and maybe we can have a more detailed discussion on that. I have a short PPT presentation with a couple of slides. I'm going to share my screen with all of you. Just give me a minute. Please let me know when you are able to see my PPT.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just begin slideshow. Okay, so this film is titled as Bulbul with a double B, and Bulbul again is the name of the bird, and again, the name itself takes us back to the Hindi muhavra, the Hindi proverb that we all know, "Kaid mein hai bulbul." So immediately the name invokes this overall theme of imprisonment, of caging something. And the central protagonist of the film is named as Bulbul. She is a young girl We all know the story. I'll just briefly cover for the other people who might not have watched it and are part of the discussion. We see that it begins with a child bride who's getting married, who doesn't even understand what's happening in a marriage, and she doesn't even know who the groom is. And she instantly strikes a friendship with another child of the family, who's actually the groom's younger brother. And eventually, when she discovers that the groom is not this young boy with whom he strikes an instant friendship, she is in disbelief, because this is an old man, and this part is played by this older Rahul Bose, who's like, in his 50s. And then we have this child bride who's barely 6 or 7. So the discrepancy of the age immediately strikes us as the viewers, and we get to see that eventually Bulbul grows up with this young boy, who's by relationship her Devar, uh, brother-in-law, but they strike an instant friendship, and they grow up together, listening to stories, ghost stories that are part of the Bengali folklore. And there is a particular story that they discuss among themselves, and this is a story of this trail, or this specimen, what we can see, who has inverted legs. So I'll come to that when I talk about the cultural context. But this is a particular story where they that keeps repeating in their friendship. Eventually, grow up. He kind of gets exclusively co-living, but we get to see that they are kind of very close to each other. And then we have this other character who is the sister-in-law of Bulbul. This husband of hers has a twin brother, Mohinder. And Mohinder's wife is the other character, the other female character, Vinodi. And she is, from the beginning, she is quite jealous of Bulbul, because by the status that she has in the household, she is the younger daughter-in-law. Bulbul is supposed to be the older daughter-in-law. So the irony of that kind of strikes us there. And she successfully implants this doubt in Mohinder's mind. Mindun is mine, the groom's name is Mindun, that Bulbul is having an affair with this younger boy, his brother. And he sends the brother away, and then begins this whole series of torture on Bulbul, where Bulbul is confronted by Indranil. He asks her directly, do you love him? Satya, the younger brother-in-law. And in his absence, he physically abuses her to the point that her legs are completely mutilated. And in a very, very horrid and shocking scene, when she is still recovering from her broken legs that are hung up with the tape and the bandages, she is raped brutally by the twin brother of Indone, who is also mentally unstable. So after the raid, there is a total transformation. And when Satya comes back to the mansion after completing his studies or whatever it wanted, he sees a completely changed Bulbul. And then when he comes back, he also confronts this whole thing that was happening in the village of mysterious killings of men. So this whole story is regarding that. Eventually, who becomes, as in, finally what they discover in terms of who is the killer. And this is where the film looks a little cliched, because there are no surprises in the end, and we get to see that it was Bulbul who was, who's now turned into this typical witch figure that they had been talking about in the beginning of the film. And she is the one who's extracting revenge not only on Mohinder, her refuge, but also on all the men who abused women. So she is this, this Devi, which binary all fused together in one figure. And this is how the film ends. So this is the brief and the very concise storyline of the film. There are many things that are worth noticing in the film, and one of the first things that we get to see in this film is that of the setting of the film. And here we are taken again back to the Indian tradition of folk horror or folk gossip that we get to see here, where the Haveli or the huge mansion, which is again reminiscent of the feudal era, becomes the setting, and this is where all strange things happen. So in Bulbul also we have this huge palatial mansion sprawling over acres of land, and this is how most of the shots of the Haveli are taken from a long distance camera trans, and you get to see all the pillars and several other mysteries of this particular mansion. There are then underground passages and other things which is very mysterious as well. And the setting of the Haveli again has been very prominent in Indian horror, especially if you think of the Haveli series. Ghost Hunters.
Swaralipi, just a second. I think there's some background hum. I- I- there's some background hum which is often drowning out your voice.
Okay, I'll try to put the mic closer to my mouth. Is this better? Is this better? Because I don't have anything going on here. I don't know what's
No, it's not better. Sorry, Swaralipi, it's not better.
Okay,
There's a constant hissing sound.
okay. Maybe I'll try to turn off the fan if that works. Let me try that. Just give me a second.
That's better.
I'll try to turn off the fan.
I think it has nothing to do with the fan. It's better to
Okay,
speak directly without the earphones.
without the okay. Okay, let me try. Okay, is this better?
Not.
Am I audible now?
You have to remove it from the system.
Yeah, I removed it from the system. I'm no longer connected to it.
But the
Oh,
background is still there.
but the noise is continuing.
Okay, it's still continuing. So let me
When you're
Yeah.
not speaking, there's no noise. But when you start speaking, there is a noise.
turn to the side and see. Okay, that, okay, okay, let me try something. I'll try to log out and log in at this time.
Okay.
Do you think that might work?
Okay.
Or maybe I'll try to move to another place. I'll see some other corner of the house. Just let me know whenever it is better in terms of the sound.
Okay. Otherwise, uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Otherwise, if you just speak a little over the sound, I think we'll be able to hear you.
Is this better? Do I
Yeah.
sound better?
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think you should try log.
Yeah. I think it was something to do with the network. So I'll just sit here, the other
Okay.
corner of the house, and maybe that will be better. Okay.
Still there.
And I think the screen share has disappeared. Or at
Okay.
least it's not there on my screen.
Okay.
It is
It's
there.
showing you are
I can see
screen
it.
sharing.
Oh,
No,
really? Okay.
It
I
is there. I
don't.
can see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fine
it's
then.
showing sharing from my end.
Okay. Fine then. Yeah, fine. I'll
Okay.
just pin it back. Yeah.
Okay.
but the background sound is still there, Swaralipi. Maybe you should log off and log in again.
Yeah. Is it better now? Am I audible?
Not really.
You're audible, though there is sound in the background, you're audible.
Okay. There's still sound in the background.
Yes.
Oh, I have no idea actually what is happening.
No, I think it's some computer sound which is kind of getting amplified.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. I'll try to.
As long as we can hear you, it's okay. We'll just ignore the noise in the background.
Oh, sorry about it. I really
No,
don't know
no
how to
problem.
fix it.
No, go ahead. No problem.
All right. We have this whole series of Haveli movies that we saw being produced by the Ramsey brothers, and we have this whole series of Havelis where all kinds of strange monstrous creatures could be found. The Purani Haveli and Darauni Haveli. So the Haveli becomes a very prominent trope in many of the Indian horror films that we get to see. And here also we see that one of the things that strikes us immediately is the setting of the film, the Haveli itself. And again, the Haveli stands for this idea of patriarchal, uh, supremacy. It stands for feudal domination. So we get to see this is the old world order, and this is not set in the contemporary age, if we can say that. It immediately takes us back in terms of time, in terms of place, and it strikes us immediately the location of the Haveli and all the mysterious things that happen there. So the setting of the film is really interesting to look at. We get to see that there are a lot of night scenes that are depicted in the film, and again, I mean, the use of the palanquin, which is again something that is pre-modern, that is an old world thing that we get to see. The child bride also, child marriage also is something that takes us back to this uh, pre-modern era of the time. So immediately as we are taken into the film, we see that we are taken into this world that by itself is so mysterious and so uncanny, and also exotic. I mean, this is something that I'm going to come to later on. Like when you watch the film, there are several exotic elements that are used in the film that some way sometimes takes us away from the violence that is happening in the film. So you are so drawn into the paraphernalia that is happening in the film that we get to see that there is this setting that kind of brings us to this era. There is one more film that I wanted to mention with reference to this, and this is again a film named Tumbad. And we see that in Tumbad also of the same genre, we see the folk horror genre being used in Tumbad as well. And we get to see that in Pumbad also we have this Haveli and this old patriarch who is the exploitative patriarchal figure of the village. So I see similarities there as well. If you have watched Pumbad, you would know what I'm talking about here. A similar kind of pre-modern landscape is in this as part horror uh, of the horror scene. This is another shot from the film, and this is the Haveli at night. Again, lit not by electricity, but by all these old candles and diyas. And this is where the lovers are meeting, but at the same time, there are these shades that are there, which are very, very scary to look at. The use of light in the film is very interesting because we see predominantly there are two shades that are being used. There is this night scenes that are shown in dark hues of gray and dark blue and black, and then we also have the red uh, invading the scene in different ways. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning of my discussion, that there are several specifically cultural contexts that are used in the film that might not be familiar to people who are not Bengali. Let me take them up one by one. The first reference that is very culturally specific is that of the Pethni, as I was mentioning. The Pethni, or this female ghost figure, is a figure that is a part of the Bengali folklore. And what is interesting about this Pethni figure is that, I mean, she is a little different from the Hindi Churail or the other forms of female ghosts that we get to see in other regional cultures. The Bengali Pethni is somebody who has this unrequited desire for domesticity. So apparently, if a woman dies with the desire of spending her life with her husband or to have kids, and if she dies suddenly, then the folklore goes as that she becomes a Pethni, and she is always trying to usurp somebody else's domesticity so that she can live the life that she had imagined for herself. So the Pethni again is also identified in Bengali folklore by her dangling feet. So the Pethni is supposed to sit in a particular tree known as Shaura, the Shaura tree, and she is supposed to sit on a branch and dangle her feet. And this reference is used in Bulbul as well in the very first scene, where we see Bulbul also as a child bride is dangling her feet. That is one of the first shots that we get to see of Bulbul, her feet. There are a lot of other scenes where feet are used, and feet are used as different types of symbols that we get to see here. So this is one specifically, important cultural context. Apart from that, there are several references to Kali and the goddess Kali, which again is the most one of the most popular deities in Bengal. So Bengal has this long tradition of tantric beliefs, and Bengali Hinduism is a little different from the pan-Indian Hinduism that we get to see. So here also the Kali, again, Kali is somebody who's bloodthirsty. Kali is somebody who avenges, any wrong that has been done. So Kali's image is also invoked repeatedly, and this is a very typically Bengali image of Kali with very Bengali face that we get to see in the film. One of the major tropes that is used in the film is from Rabindranath Tagore's Noshkuni, which is a short story, which is partially autobiographical because it talks about Tagore's own relationship with his sister-in-law, his elder sister-in-law, and they also, more than a romantic relationship, they had a relationship of artistic creativity. So, as a young poet, Tagore would write his, early drafts of the poems and show it to Kadambari Devi, and Kadambari Devi again would be the one who would, share her writings with Tagore, and they formed this bond of friendship. And eventually, it so reached at a point that Kadambari Devi felt very insecure when Tagore had married, and she commits suicide. So this is part of the actual, life story of Tagore. Though there are a lot of controversies regarding whether we can read Tagore and Kadambari Devi's friendship as something of a romantic life. But the same theme has been explored by Satyajit Ray in Charulata, where again, the elder sister-in-law and the brother-in-law become very close to each other, and there are several scenes where we see that these two, spend time with each other, and they share their pains and their, uh, uh, the intimate moments that they have, not so much sexual than, in terms of the friendship that they develop. And interesting enough, in Bulbul, there are certain scenes that seem to be like exact replica from Ray's films. So these are some of the screenshots from Ray's Charurata, which are very similar to what we get to see in Bulbul. So this is a scene where Charulata is speaking to her brother-in-law, and in the next screenshot is from Bulbul, where the same scene is kind of there. And then the use of these bars that we get to see, the window bars. A similar shot has been used in Bulbul as well. The references are very, very similar. There are parallels that can be drawn immediately in terms of the intertextuality that we get to see in Bulbul with Charulata. The use of, again, kashful, this particular herb that we get to see in Bengali fields, especially in the fields of Bengal, especially during the autumn season, during the time of Durga Puja. Ray's very famous Pother Pachali has this extensive scene with the kashful and the train going in there. And we see a lot of use of the kashful here again in Bulbul. And Kashful again, because it comes during the season when we have the greatest festival, the biggest festival of Bengal, Durga Puja, we get to see that Kashful again stands for this female power, the divine power of femininity of, Mata Durga, and how Bulbul becomes a representative of Kali and Durga at the same time. So these are like specific references that we get to see. Apart from that, there is a song that is used in the movie, which is again a very famous Baul song of Bengal that created a lot of controversy in the movie. It's a song about warning Radha, who would be blamed, and she would be, the one who would be called as the characterless one. She would bear the brunt of having an affair with Krishna. So the song says that following to me Radha, Radha, you will be tainted if you go to meet Krishna. So this song is used when Bulbul is going to meet Satya, and her sister-in-law watches them very closely. And we know the says that, you have to be careful because the only is going to be painted. So these are like, some of the cultural references that we get to see that are specifically Bengali in the film. Very fascinating is the two women characters. You have Bulbul as the protagonist, Binodini as the other woman, who's not really the other woman because after the rape scene, Binodini comes as a sympathizer and somebody who understands Bulbul's pain. But at the same time, she is also very spiteful at times. She is also shown to have a sexual relationship with Bulbul's husband, and she somehow feels that, I mean, she is the elder one by age, but she has to respect Bulbul as the elder sister-in-law. So, and she is also married to Mohindro, who is mentally unstable. She is more like, his caretaker rather than his wife. So these are certain things that we get to see in Binodini, who becomes a complex character because she is neither like a completely evil woman, nor obviously she can be called like a generous woman in that sense. She's the one who plants this doubt about Bulbul having an affair with Satya in Mohendro's, in Indranil's mind. Binodini and Mohendro again are names I forgot to mention there, are names that are again taken from another novel of Tagore, Chokher Bali, where we see Binodini, the character of Binodini in Chokher Bali also is somebody who kind of, uh, tries to disrupt the marital life of her friend Ashalota. So here also we see Binodini playing the same role. However, the male character is named Mohindro, who's also the protagonist of Chokher Bali. Her husband is Mohindro, but this time uh, the main character, the male main character is Indronil, her brother-in-law, not her husband. Okay. All right. A very interesting use of feet and toes in the film. There are several shots where toes are being used, where feet are being used, and toe rings are again presented as something that are supposed to keep women under check. And toe rings are the symbol of again, encaging women and imprisoning women. And in the scene where Bulbul is eager to meet Satya and she goes and she says, I'm not interested in any jewelry or anything. And Binodini tries to stop her just to see how desperate she becomes to meet Satya. And in one of in the scene, in one of the dialogues, she says that you need some new jewelry, especially toe rings, because your toe rings seem to have loosened a bit. So toe rings come to represent the bondage that women have to, succumb to in a patriarchal setup. And Bulbul, by rejecting that kind of flouts that setup, and therefore she has to be punished. Feet again become the symbol of imprisonment, the symbol of losing of innocence, and a very haunting scene, as I mentioned, is the image of the bandaged feet, because after Indronil beats Bulbul up very brutally, her feet turn upside down, and one of the features of the Pithni that I was talking about in a few slides ago, one of the features of the Pithni is that she would have inverted feet. So Bulbul also eventually gets to have inverted feet, not because she becomes a ghost, but because of the torture that she goes through. Along with the women, we also have three different shades of masculinities that we get to see in a very interesting shot where the groom comes to meet the bride for the first time. We also see his twin brother standing there. So both Mohindro and Indronil would be there in this scene that I have on the next slide. And we see that both these men would finally become tormentors of Bulbul. So we see three main characters, uh, actually four main characters. So we have Indronil as the husband who wants to keep his wife under check. Then we have Mohindro, who's mentally unstable, and from the beginning he is constantly referring to Bulbul uh, as a toy, like, it's my doll, I want to play with it, and eventually he's the one who rapes her. And then we have Satya, who initially is the closest confidant of Bulbul. But when Satya returns after completing his studies, when his elder brother has already left the Haveli, and we get to see that Bulbul was in charge of all the affairs, Satya doesn't like it, and immediately he tries to get the reins back in his hands, and he says that women are not meant to handle these affairs. This is a man's world, and Bulbul must do parda and must not mingle with other men. The only sane man that we get to see is Sudeep, who is also Bulbul's doctor. And in the second half of the film, we see that Bulbul grows very close to him. And he's the only one who understands what is going on in the Haveli and what has actually happened to Bulbul. Because when he is called to treat Bulbul's absolutely battered feet, he is told that she just fell from the stairs. So there is also this thing about not talking about domestic violence at all, and women are just supposed to be mum about it. They're not supposed to talk about it, and Sudeep immediately understands what is happening. So we see these three shades of men and masculinity in the film. Satya is apparently the modern one, the more progressive one, the one who apparently embodies liberal progressive views. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He doesn't believe that this is some supernatural force that is causing the murder of the men in the village. But at the same time, we also see him that he also wants to impose his patriarchal domination over Bulbul and the Haveli. And he wants to take over the reins in his hands as a man of the house. We see a conflict between science and supernatural, and we get to see that we're constantly questioned whether what is being presented to us is actually happening or this is just a figment of imagination, or whether there is a scientific logical reason behind this strange killing. So we are swayed between science and supernaturalism throughout the film. What I also wanted to point out, and this is something very interesting, is the way aesthetic elements have been used in the film. So this is something I was just mentioning a few minutes ago about how, on the one hand, the film disturbs us, but on the other hand, it also kind of appeals to us in a way that we kind of move away from the violence, and we are soaked into the exotic presentation of many things. So one of the things that the film does is that it recreates several scenes from the paintings of Raja Ravi Verma, and we get to see that this is one scene where this woman is playing the veena, and then the very famous peacock fan scene, and the scene where Mohindro is beating Bulbul, and the whole scene is shot in slow motion with the clouds in the background that is reflected, a painting of the clouds that is reflected on the mirror. So it is very aesthetically appealing, and there is a lot of exotic appeal of the film, and especially for a non-Bengali audience. There is so much of surfeit of presenting this old Bengali culture in an exotic manner that it sometimes you are distracted from the violence that is happening here, because you are so taken in by the beauty of what is being presented on the screen. Um, Same with the horror and the violence. This is something that we can talk more when we have the discussion face to face, where you really think that the way the film has been presented in terms of the cinematic element, the beauty of the film in terms of how it captures uh, certain aesthetic elements is something that takes us away from the violence, or it aggravates and enhances the violence elements. Um, One of the things that the film seems to question is how to define the aspects of violence. On the one hand, the killing of the men is obviously something that is extremely violent. That is the first thing that is shown, and Satya keeps talking about how brutally these men are killed. But on the other hand, we are also shown again, how violence is happening at different levels on different scales with the women, whether it is the child bride Bulbul, whether it is the grown up Bulbul, or even Binodini or other women. Because after Mohindro is killed by the avenging Bulbul, we see that Binodini becomes a widow. And again, if we talk about widowhood in old Bengal, it itself invokes these images of the life of the widows and the kind of life that they were made to lead. Many of them were just uh, sent away to Kashi, to Benares, in seclusion. And those who stayed behind led a life of austerity and extreme penance. So there are different kinds of violence that is happening to the women. But on the other hand, there is this explicit violence that is happening in terms of the brutal murder of the men of the village. Okay. One more thing that we get to see that at a point, after a point, it becomes like it's so much there in the film. This use of red and crimson reminds us, obviously, of many other reviewers have also pointed out that it reminds us of the Crimson Peak film that we see of a gothic genre. There's this surfeit of red uh, in the on the screen. So most of the night scenes are shot in red. When Bulbul encounters this divine power for the first time, when Bulbul is like a witch, she's traversing on the top of the treetop from one treetop to another, and her feet are inverted. That is the blood moon that we get to see. The image of the Kali figurine also is shot in red, and then all the night scenes where these men go out to hunt the witch, that also is shot in red. So there is this overuse of red that we get to see in the film, which again symbolizes a lot of things. It symbolizes power, symbolizes blood, violence, revenge, and many other things. So these are some of the things that I wanted to just point out, and there are many other things that we can also talk about, which I think we can do once we start our discussion. And I will stop my screen sharing now, and maybe we'll get back to the call. Yes, I think I've stopped the sharing. So I would love to hear your take on the film and what you think was good and fascinating about the film, if you think so.
Thank you very much, Swaralipi, for this really wonderful presentation. I mean, thanks for all those intertextual references, also drawing our attention to, the frames and the hues, in the film. Because I think when we watch the film, I mean, generally it's not that we are able to capture all its nuances with one viewing. I think you have drawn our attention to these various aspects, and also as you said, where at various points one does feel that a kind of exoticization and creation of a fascinating world is happening, even as the undercurrents of violence are kind of building up. So thanks really for this, really well worked out presentation.
My
Anyone?
pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone now who would like to come in at this point and share your views about the film or about any aspect of Swaralipi's presentation?
Can I come in, Nikhila?
Yeah, please go ahead, Geeta.
Yeah, thank you, Swaralipi. As Nikhila has already said, it was a very nice presentation. Thanks for that. Um, yeah, actually, one of the first things that struck me while watching the film is, of course, its similarity with Charulata. And and uh, what another thing that really I found very interesting is the way the film represents the woman as a writer. And what is sad is even her creativity is saddled to that of a man, because she is only, a co-writer. Both of them are writing the story together. They take turns to, write it. And when Satya leaves India, all she manages to do is to just burn the manuscript. Instead of going ahead with her writing, she becomes, she's rendered incapable of carrying forward the story without the help of a man. So it's kind of indicative of the inability of the woman to take forward the action in an independent fashion. So that was something that was interesting for me. And as far as you have already mentioned, about the use of the color red, and that I think did turn excessive and annoying beyond the point of time. And it all initially, of course, it seemed like it was being used in for symbolic purposes, but surely it got overdone, later. And even if you examine it as a horror film, even there, I think somewhere it fails, as a horror film, because there are very few scenes, which actually evoke that fear and terror and all that. And even this thing about the scenes in which she's shown, jumping from those trees and the branches and all that, somehow seems to just end up as being a bit tacky. So that is what I felt. And the relationship between the grown-up Satya and Bulbul, that I thought was quite, interestingly presented, because there is an edginess to their relationship, which is, like, it cannot be fully expressed, and it is doomed to remain unconsummated. So that edginess in that brother-in-law sister-in-law relationship, I thought was very well done. But the rape scene, of course, was, like, just totally, it was just awful. It was simply awful, and again, it was excessive. There was no need for, that kind of directness in depicting that particular scene. And yes, it plays with this whole Chudel myth, and it has the quality, the film has the quality of a fable. But I was just wondering, the very use of this theme for the press. At one level, it's a period film, yes. And once you see it as a period film, then there's no point in questioning the use of this whole woman as avenger, in the role of not just a woman but as somebody supernatural, as a supernatural figure, the Chudel figure. But I was just wondering, I mean, like, what, why did she have to choose this kind? I mean, like, is there any particular reason? Does it serve any particular purpose in using that myth for contemporary times? Recycling of that myth for today. That's all. Some of
Yeah.
the
If
Swaralipi, you want to come in? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say a little thing that is usually when we see this female horror figure, like the female ghost, we don't really see the ghost being rationalized in any way. So we have had our share of. I mean, I'm particularly talking about obviously popular cinema. I'm not talking about well done films where there is this nuanced take on the female horror. Uh, because I mean, if you think about Tagore's Monihara, on the other hand, that is a much more nuanced film that uh, deals with this ghost story of this woman turned into this the skeleton who comes to haunt the man at night. That's a different thing. But usually in popular films, when we get to see the female ghost figure, the female supernatural, we get to see that there's no backstory or there's no building up to that horror. I mean, it happens very, very abruptly. For example, in Raat, the possession of the women does not have a logical kind of backdrop to it. I mean, she just goes to the forest and she gets possessed. That's it. So it happens that the woman's body then becomes a repository of this supernatural power, and the woman doesn't really have an agency apart from just the whole process of exorcism then happens, that the woman's body has to get rid of this, this power that is overpowering her. What I felt was different in Bulbul was that it was almost like, she internalized this supernatural element. It was not another force that came and possessed her body, which was easy to possess, but this is like, a woman turned into the supernatural figure. So, and there is a subversion that is happening in terms of, a woman being possessed and becoming a churel. There is no other churel here, or there's no other, power here that is coming and capturing her body. uh, so I thought that that kind of, makes it a little different from the other female bodies turned into supernatural specters in a way. So that was in, but I do agree with all the other points. That's what when I suggested the film to Nicola, I also told her that I don't think it is a cinematically brilliant movie because there are many things that are happening that are quite cliched and sometimes overdone. So I absolutely agree with what you were saying in terms of, overdoing it in terms of the redness or the horror element is not there. I mean, you are not spooked at all. There's nothing spooky about the film per se, and it's very predictable. We all know who this killer is. And it's not waiting to be revealed to us as a shock. So definitely, that is something we have to all agree.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to respond to the film at this point? Please unmute yourselves if anyone wants to respond now. Okay, Kalpalata, please go ahead.
I wanted to say something about the representation of Chudal. Um, symbolically, it is actually the celebration of woman's spirit, which can't be, um, domesticated. But on the other hand, I would like to say that in these kind of films, when women are represented either as a Devi or Chudal, it is bit problematic for me. And because for me, why woman has to become Chudal to become, powerful. And on the other hand, when also after becoming Chudal, she is also protecting other women. So my problem here is that why a woman has to become has to uh, have the supernatural powers to protect other women. Why can't be simply a woman, a normal woman, and fight for other women? And why can't be a normal human being? For example, I also saw very recently this film in Netflix only, Sir, in which it is a very, I mean, the representation of woman is really wonderful. She's a very powerful. She is a maid, and she has so much of self-respect, and the representation I really liked because it is a normal human being. So my problem basically is why she has to become a chudal to be a powerful woman.
Swaralipi, do you want to say something at this point?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, it plays in this binary tropes of the woman as the goddess or the woman as, the supernatural being who's more powerful because of her supernatural powers. I mean, she's not exerting power because she's a woman, but she's exerting power because, there is something that enables her to do beyond the capacity of human beings. So definitely, this binary is something that comes through the film, and that is definitely problematic. You cannot ignore that. However, is interesting here is the character of Binodini. And when we talk about the representation of women, I mean, of course, we have Bulbul on the one hand, who is kind of uh, getting trapped in these binaries. There's Binodini, who is, I think, much more fluid in terms of how she comes across. Because on the one hand, there are things that she is able to exert because of her power as a woman. I mean, the very way in which she is able to convince Internet, and she is, in a way, she tries to take power away from Bulbul. So, if we think of the women representation of women in the film, I think Binodini as a person is a much more human representation than Bulbul. Bulbul becomes the symbol of patriarchal violence. So, more than the human being that she is, we get to see her as the the canvas on which patriarchal violence is drawn in different shades. So she's the one who's enduring, and therefore she gets trapped in this binary, because this is precisely how women have been understood in these binary figures traditionally. So this is something, yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree with you completely in terms of the binaries that are offered in the film, of what are the two options that Bulbul had, either as the Devi or as the witch that is there.
Yeah, actually, about this point, I was thinking somewhat differently, in the sense that, yes, I mean, another film that I constantly had in my mind, when I was thinking about this film is Satyajit Ray's Devi.
Devi, yeah.
Now, of course, I think what is interesting in both these films is that these are imputed identities.
Yes.
So it's not that the women in either case is taking on or welcoming the identity that is thrust on them, or even uh, acting out those identities in ways that they would like to be identified as Devi or Chudel or whatever. So they're doing what they have to do. But it seems like these are identities that are being foisted upon them, and the terrible implications that they have to live out of these foisted identities. To me, that was somewhat common and equally traumatic in both the films. And aside from that, another point that I was thinking of was how, your the point about the Havelis that you made right at the outset. This is about how feudal conjugal relationships are marked in cinema, and how the feudal is often evoked for all kinds of deviant, within quotes, sexual arrangements, whether it's polygamy, polyamory, incest, and various other kinds of sexual deviances. Often, I feel that the perspective, on these kind of sexual arrangements comes from a modern, normative, monogamous kind of conjugality. I think that is also somewhere, kind of playing in the film too. And I thought another very interesting aspect in this film is not only in terms of, as you mentioned, Binodini is someone who has, sexual relations. I mean, she's a woman of the family, available to the head of the family. But it seems that there is more at stake when the wife has to kind of have even some kind of a friendship with someone like Satya, because it doesn't seem like there is anything more between them than so Bulbul's even friendship with Satya seems to upset so many levels of power hierarchies. So it seems like there is the undercurrent is more than just sexual jealousy, but also a whole lot is at stake within the feudal power hierarchy. So I thought some of those aspects were really brought out well in the film. I mean, one can be critical about some of the aspects that we discussed earlier, but some of these really well worked out elements in the film I thought were also quite striking. Yeah. So thanks. Anyone who would like to respond? Swaralipi would like to respond, or Tarakeshwar has also raised his hand.
No, just a quick intervention. Within the narrative, Bulbul is neither presented as a uh, goddess or as a uh, chudel. I think it is the perception of the other characters
Yeah.
within the narrative. So the narrative itself is not presenting her as a either as a goddess or as a chudel. That we need to keep in mind and then discuss. A quick clarification I wanted was about whether it is a Bengali film or an Hindi film set in Bengal.
No, no, it's a Hindi film. It's a Hindi film, but the setting is of Bengal. It's not a
Because
Bengali film.
the word that is used in the Hindi film is chudel, but you refer to a Bengali word for it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
said that is a
because
different from chudel.
yeah, that's because the characteristics that they mention when they're describing the churel are the characteristics of the Bengali churel. That is very specific to Bengali. The inverted feet and the dangling of the feet of the churel is something that is very specific to the Bengali context. So they mention it because it's a Hindi language film. But what they refer to as the churel or how they describe the churel, that once upon a time in a forest there lived the churel and she had inverted feet. So there are umpteen number of folk tales in Bengal where you have this, another aspect of this Bengali churel is that she can con people. So people think that she is actually the wife of the household, and by looking at her feet, which are inverted, there are several stories which uses this trope of the final discovery of the churel happens because they get to see her feet and they see that the feet are inverted. So there was a lot of thrust on this inversion of the feet and how she, walks this interpair, which is very specific. That's why I mentioned that. I don't think it is in the other cultural references of the jewelry.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, can I come in?
Please, yes, go ahead.
You see, I have a whole lot of problems with this film. Basically, because I know that it is, good to describe all the details about Bengal vis-a-vis the way this whole story has been presented. But the fact is, um, like to ask a simple question. Why Bengal? Because to my mind, it is actually giving body to a long held North Indian myth of the Bengali woman who creates, as the Chudai, and therefore, unless there is a context, if it was an adaptation, I would understand. All the references to Rabindranath Tagore, to incestuous relationships, they are just there in order to add atmosphere, and they can be very easily, described as some kind of an appropriation. Even madness has been appropriated. It does not throw any light on the issue of madness, but it is only used to show violence in a totally unnecessary manner. And also, we keep forgetting the fact that the options which the woman has in Bengal and in elsewhere to deal with patriarchy, if it is shown only as that she becomes a witch or she becomes a manipulator like Birodini here, she becomes a disruptive character. These are essentially male constructs in a patriarchal society. To talk about them or to assume that they are truths, or they are actually liberating influences on the life of the woman is, I think, it requires a kind of a rethink. So, to what extent, what are the credentials of this film as a feminist one? I seriously doubt that. No matter, even if the central character is a woman, because after all, and then This is not the perception that she's either a Devi. She's never shown as a Devi in any form, except that these little images of Kali, which are thrown in once in a while, just to draw our attention that it takes place in Bengal. And this is a kind of a colonial idea of the female force, as to how Kali is bloodthirsty, so it cannot be used as a feminist notion of redemption of a persecuted woman. Either she breaks into, some kind of a supernatural avatar and wreaks vengeance on mankind. All this is simply, playing around with colonial and with untrue notions of what a particular culture is, to make it exotic, to make it really interesting for. I don't think there is any truth in this. For a simple reason, she may say that I'm very fascinated by Bengal. I mean, isn't this landlord culture equally prevalent? Much more so, the fact of child marriage, much more so in North India than in Bengal, and particularly in the 19th century. I mean, she would draws from the stories of as if these relationships, to uh, throw a little suggestion that this is the, Charulata and Amal and all that is only a kind of appropriation which does not add to our understanding of the situation, nor does it reflect very well upon your understanding of the situation as a filmmaker. You are only using this as something as props in order to try to tell your story and make it as interesting as you want to by throwing in the red color and the chulail flying on. Where does she get these pictures from? These pictures are from the male mind, isn't it? And that is how the man imagines the woman would behave in order to break out of a patriotic mold, in a patriarchal mold in the society. Even Vinodini's character, she is so artificial. No widow even at that time, unless it was immediately after the ceremony, the death ceremony of her husband, would be completely shaven. In all films of that, in all pictures of that particular time, you will find that with a little bit of hair, the hair is growing. They did not necessarily have to be completely clean shaven all the time. And this is after, not immediately after the death of the husband, right? Even the madness, it shows only the inequality, the suppression of the woman, and it is needlessly extended. It is sexploitation of the worst kind. It does not make us feel pity on the woman. It makes us a little angry about someone who is using it to sell her goods. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
Swaralipi, do you want to respond to this
No.
critique? Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to defend the film at all. There are definitely, as I mentioned in the beginning also, that there are several issues and there is several problematic things that are happening. One of them is obviously the exotic elements that are brought in that kind of distracts us from the violence. I mean, the scene where Indranil is, is lifting his stick up. I mean, that has been shot in slow motion, and I showed a screenshot of the whole scene where you have this beautiful image that is being reflected on the mirror, which is not really adding any meaning to the violence, not any symbolic meaning to the violence, apart from making it beautiful to look at. So I absolutely agree with you in terms of the exotic elements that have been used, and it shows that it's some kind of a fascination with the Bengali culture and how Bengal has been represented in mainstream Indian cinema as well. You always imagine Bengal or Bengalis in red and white saris and bangles, and they are into ululations, and they are doing Durga Puja and so on. Um, but again, at the same time, I think, I mean, if we take this film and we compare it with another film of this genre, the folk horror genre that we were talking, that film is Tumbad. where we see, many things that are overlapping with this film as well. I think one of the things that this whole setting of Bengal does is a sense of an alienation, because there is a sense of defamiliarization with, the elements as well, because it is something that appeals to us, but at the same time, it is something that also seems to be happening in a context that we know of. So the whole point of setting it at a time which is not our own time, at a place which is not our own place, is a very essential element of the folk genre. Because when we're talking about the folk horror, I mean, this is very distinct from the urban ghost stories that we get to see, where a couple moves into a modern apartment and the setting is something that we can immediately identify with. So I don't know. I mean, if it was, I mean, I don't know if they gave so much thought into it, but as a viewer, if I'm not a Bengali, I am drawn into this world, and I am, kind of alienated from what I might find familiar in this world. And I find this trope in a number of folk horror genres, which deliberately creates this sense of alienation from what is familiar. So, I mean, if we talk about, I mean, the horror elements missing, one of the things that kind of takes us away from the horror elements is that we do not find elements of familiar horror there. What we see is that it's a different world, and then you have this willing suspension of disbelief also. Like, is it really happening, or is it something that can be explained through science as well? So I think the entire setting is displaced in terms of time, in terms of place, in terms of context for the mainstream audience.
I think I too agree with you, Swaralipi. The ending, I thought the epilogue was kind of interesting as well, which kind of redeemed the actions of the three brothers in terms of them coming to some kind of a self-realization and distancing themselves from the Haveli or their acts of violence. So it's kind of the focus moves from Bulbul to Satya, and Satya kind of feeling remorseful and for what they did, and realizing also as you said, this film is a kind of I mean, it's offering rational parameters to judge the woman's action, not taking it into the element, into the realm of the supernatural or the Chudail per se, but giving a kind of rational explanation as to what might have transformed an innocent woman to, the kind of vengeful acts that she undertakes. So, in that sense, this film set in Bengal uses certain familiar tropes, but also departs from those, I would think. Yeah. Anyone else would like to come in, would like to say anything at this point? Nandini, you've unmuted yourself. Would you like to come in?
Uh, Hi, no, I came in late. I was just wondering, uh, as a Bengali, of course, it's very different, I think, seeing it as somebody from who's grown up with all these, these backward feet and whatnot. I just felt that I was quite curious how one could see this film, sort of compare it to Stree, the film Stree, rather than Tumba. Although in terms of horror, maybe Tumbad comes. Maybe I thought Tumbad, frankly, was a more sophisticated film than this one. That's my personal thing. But how would one look at it with respect to Stree? What struck me when I was seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in C, the take on the female aspect of the supernatural is completely different. I mean, what we see here is there is no trivialization of the whole thing, definitely. In Sri, we see it is mostly a man's view of what is happening. So the central character is obviously not the Sri, but how these men try to grapple with this myth and what they do. And many a times there is a trivialization. And the way the horror is represented is something that they make fun of. And until the end of the film, when we reach the end of the film, and there is some kind of subversion that is happening, and we get to see that these men had been set up. I mean, they walked into the trap right away. But till then, throughout the film, which uses a lot of popular cultural tropes, we get to see that there is a trivialization. I mean, they crack jokes and they are making fun of how the sea is going to come and take them, and there's this comic element which runs, which trivializes this whole aspect of the folk horror. I mean, that's what I thought. I don't know. But as I told you, I mean, at the end, there is an inversion, there is some kind of a subversion that is happening there. And we see that it is something that the woman claims agency of, rather than from the men's perspective, it becomes, the Stree's whole take on the whole thing. But the most part of the film is mostly about the men and what they do. So, I mean, I think that is a very interesting take on the folk horror genre. I mean, I mentioned Tumbad specifically because of the genre, and in fact, I thought of suggesting Tumbad, but then I because this film has so many other things, and there are many things that we can critically talk about. So that's why I thought that we can also talk about things that a filmmaker should not do in terms of presenting certain things. Tumbad is cinematically obviously a better film in terms of.
One more question, Swaralipi. I just a very small, maybe trivial question. Where is this shot?
This is I'm not sure about it actually.
It's not Ravindra Bharati, no?
No. It's not a place in Bengal. They have not shot it.
It's not a place in Bengal.
No.
No.
Really?
Can I come in?
No, yeah, can I come in?
I was watching an interview of the director, and she said that it is shot in a Haveli, some 80 kilometers outside Kolkata.
Is it okay? Oh, maybe I didn't know about it because no, it's not Ravindra Bharati definitely.
It has that look, no? That's why I was wondering. It has the dalan and all that. So I was just thinking it looks very Bengali actually, doesn't it? I don't know. I was wondering where to show. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Geeta.
Yeah, anyone else would like to come in now? Jayant Das Gupta, you've unmuted yourself. Any further points to make?
Um, no, not really, because see, obviously, it has certain elements which make us think. But I have been a little disturbed about the fact that why is it evoking so many positive feelings when it deserves to be totally viewed in a much more negative as an incompetent film. You know, that is what my problem was. It is an incompetent film masquerading as a masterpiece, which was something which I found a little difficult to take. And pretentious. It's terribly pretentious. And if it is claiming to be a feminist film, it is failing very badly there, because she uses all the tropes which are created by man in order to think of what they want to think about women, as they always have, whether it is in Bengal or whether it is in UP or Thakur. And there are these mistakes. I mean, how can Satya be a Thakur? Because she is taking it from Rabindranath Thakur, whose family name was Thakur. Otherwise, Thakur as a landlord is a purely North Indian term. Thakur Sahab, he's a Rajput. Here, these are neither Rajputs, they're not Brahmins, so, and yet they're using the surname Thakur. The caste pool is never grown inside, even in an abandoned Haveli. A cash will always grows next to water, in the wilderness, in open land, And here, just to appropriate once more, I will use that word, the whole Tagore scenario, the railway train passing while the two children watch it wistfully, amidst the field of Kash in Pather Panchali, to borrow that to their own use, it is factually wrong. And abandoned Haveli will be filled with what is called as agacha, which is, all kinds of wild plants and grasses. It will not be such an aesthetically displayed kashmir. But these are minor mistakes. But together they add up to a total incomprehension of the milieu which you are trying to create. And at the same time, your intention becomes, open to doubt. That is what I felt about it. Because I have read accounts of how even in the urban middle class educated, you know, minds of North India, there are these stories of young Bengali women not finding houses that they can rent because the lady of the house has a misconception, it has a fear, a very genuine fear that she has grown up. तो चिड़ैल भी ये तो आदमियों पे जादू कर देती है. People have grown up with this kind of a thing, and she is here legitimizing that by choosing to, locate it in Bengal when she has no reason, when she has no particular reason. You understand what I am trying to say? I mean, there's not much point in sort of nitpicking about the little things of what she could have done and what he could not have done. I'm talking about the basic effect of the film is totally wrong. It has failed as a film. It has failed as a film, and even if it was an honest attempt to show as a Churel who becomes what she becomes, even it is a part of a male imagination, a patriarchal male imagination, to throw the fear of God into men at any time that they cannot get away with nonsense would have been a useful thing. Here it does not even do that, because uh, they all just go away. They have a wonderful life after that. That's it. And nobody is learned to learn left to learn any lesson from it. I don't know. That is the feeling that I was left. That
Yeah.
That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, Nandini, you have unmuted yourself. Do you want to respond?
No.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay, so I maybe have 3-4 points. If I am talking too much, please stop me. So one movie I would like to suggest, which is about witches in Africa. So maybe some of you have already watched it. It's called I Am Not a Witch. It's about a little girl who is accused of being a witch, and then it's a beautiful movie. So maybe you could watch it. Since we were talking so much about chudels and getting haunted and women being oppressed and all that. So that is one thing. Second thing is I will agree with Jayanji that this concept of women being portrayed in that way is not only limited to Bengal, because in Maharashtra we do have the same kind of treatment. I mean, we had it rather. So child marriages were very common, and then um, they did shave women's heads if they were widowed. And then I felt that because this is a Netflix film, and then Netflix does come from the US maybe, so they have a foreigner's outlook towards Indian culture, and then the culture that is exposed to the Western world through maybe Satyajit Ray. So what they have greater exposure to in the world of cinema is maybe the Bengali cinema. So is that a reason why you think the producers decided to place it in Bengal, where they could have placed it anywhere else, like um, I forget the name of the movie, but then Akshay Kumar's horror movie was based in South India, and it was a remake maybe of some Tamil movie. So Vidya Balan plays that role of the haunted woman. So is that a reason you think that this was based in Bengal? And maybe I will have one more point to say after maybe you respond.
Swaralipi, do you want
Yes.
to? Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't know why she chose Bengal of all places to make this representation. As I told earlier also, that there are certain stereotypes that get repeated in the film, and if it does anything to the film, it kind of creates this element of defamiliarization completely. Like, I mean, it is a world that has nothing to do with the contemporary world. So the farther removed you are from things that you are familiar with, uh, uh, there is this this sense of alienation that we get to see in the film. There are several stereotypes, I mean, and one of the things, as I already mentioned, is that of how exotically appealing many of these things are. Like, if I mean, it seems like, if I don't know about Bengali culture, and I am fascinated and pulled to the film because I want to experience something Bengali. I mean, I'm in the mood of some Bengali entertainment. In that sense, I want something Bengali to to kind of make my weekend uh, viewing interesting. Then I'll go for a film like that. So, I mean, definitely, I mean, there are several cliches and stereotypes about Bengalis that are being used. My take on the film is not about its authenticity or whether, the representation has been true to how authentic Bengali representation has been, because we have had many serious filmmakers who have represented many nuanced aspects of Bengal and Bengali culture, which are much more layered and distinct. Uh, the reason why I chose this film was because, as a viewer, and especially as a Bengali viewer, I wanted to have a discussion with other viewers regarding this double bind that we get to see in the film. Like, on the one hand, you are, as a non-Bengali viewer, you were pulled to the film because of the immensely, surfeit of exotic elements that it is serving you on a platter. Like, you want Bengal, I'll give you Bengal. What do you want? You want a Haveli, you want women like this, you want, the exotic landscapes of Bengal, you want the Bengali sari draping. That is, given on the one hand. And then there is this excessive violence, as uh, somebody was mentioning, in terms of, like, I mean, how do you reconcile these two? I mean, on the one hand, you are, presenting something that is, appealing in terms of its aesthetic appeal. But on the other hand, you are also showing an extreme form of violence. So, as a viewer, where do you stand? I mean, are you taken away from the violence because of what it is presenting as something that is palatable or consumable about the world? So I definitely did not want to, talk about the film as something that I celebrate. Of course, it is a problematic film, and for us as viewers and critics, we need to see where the problem is. Is it because of authentic representation? Is that where the problem lies, or is it because, how we create this double bind of, I like watching it, but at the same time I know it is, something that is violating my sense of morality. So. Uh, when a film does that, for a common viewer, what does it entail, and how does it present itself? Because it is something that is trying to reach to a wider audience through Netflix. Many people would not take away, obviously, the what to say, I mean, the message that the film would uh, uh, pretend to give, if we can use the term in that sense. But it created a very interesting viewing experience for me, if I can tell about that, because I would say that people could get attracted to these aspects of Bengal, which are like, small bites, consumable bites. But at the same time, there is also this violence that is being portrayed, and it is not rationalized. None of the violence is rationalized at all uh, in any of the places. So, and not all of the violence is also, avenged, because we don't get to see any repercussion for Satya, who is equally a patriarchal figure of dominance. I mean, what he does is exactly what his brothers had been doing in different ways. So uh, that is something that is interesting. I mean, when we come across this genre on a popular platform, when we see folk horror, because the very staging of folk horror is that we are going to talk about, a once upon a time, and it is basically going to be a story that is not expected to have anything that is a semblance of realism in the first place. So I think, I mean, all the observations that we have are spot on, because as viewers, there are different aspects of the film that would get to us. And obviously, I mean, I don't think anybody is celebrating or praising the film, but what I wanted to bring here is that, I mean, there are interesting ways in which it is presented, and it can raise a lot of questions about, how this genre is being tackled in this particular film.
Oh, okay. So there is a confusion in my mind. Are you or are you not Bengali?
I am a Bengali.
Oh, okay. So you think that this is a representation of Bengali culture in a Hindi movie, or you mean to say that Bengali movies are not dealing with folk horror in Bengali?
Uh, of late, recently, there hasn't been anything in Bengali that has come out on folk horror
Oh,
of late,
okay.
recently. Yeah. So this was something that was interesting to see, because this was a non-Bengali take on the Bengali elements of folk horror. And as Jayant was rightly pointing out, that, there are, bits and pieces that are taken, and it has been like stitched like a collage for a more easily consumable Bengal or Bengali culture in that sense. So there are these things that are happening, which draws us and distracts us. I found it very distracting sometimes, because I was more invested into, how she's dressed and how the whole scene is looking like, than what is actually happening in the movie. Because it deliberately does that. I mean, the way the scenes are shot, the way, the camera pans, and the way Bulbul is presented with her hair open, and this very, very old world charm that is there. So, it's almost like putting Bengal on a tableau and representing Bengal in that way. So I found that, that dichotomy quite interesting in that manner, the
And do you think
presentation.
it was uh, a choice made by the director, or do you think it happened because of the ignorance? Because in
Uh,
Marathi, especially if you watch Marathi movies and Marathi TV serials, you shall see a period piece is presented as if it was happening today. So
there, yeah.
what happens is the Haveli is no way anywhere close to even 1950s, let alone 1880s. So I was wondering why the people are dressed in the same way and then all that. So do you think this happened because of the ignorance of the director, because of the budget, or because they wanted that to happen? Any clue you have?
No idea really, because in the interviews that we have come across, there has not been talk about deliberate misrepresentation. So they have tried to float this film as something where, they think that they have brought out certain elements of Bengali culture, even though it is a misrepresentation. So I would say that it is almost like, I mean, taking the more well-known or more popular aspects of Bengali culture, and putting it there and creating this exotically appealing, aesthetically appealing film on the one hand. But on the other hand, there is also this take on some of the elements of the female supernatural that we don't really get to see a lot, especially in the folk horror genre. I'm specifically talking about this genre, and how we see films in this genre being represented in terms of popular cinema.
Oh, okay. So, one more point, maybe you have watched that serial long back in the 1990s, or maybe even before that, when we had only our national network. So there was a TV serial made which was called Mujrim Hajir. So Mujrim Hajir, maybe some of us have some, recollection of Nutan and Utpal that playing two significant roles in that. But then, if I mean, the discussion, not actually watching of the movie, because the movie has so many distractions. I felt even after the first scene, why should I even watch the movie, except for the discussion and so on. So I felt that the selection of a good story, do you think that is very important rather than coming up with something that we have to put together within a span of 2 months for something like Netflix? Because they would have immense pressure in terms of within how many days and within how much money you have to complete your project. So, do you not think that is like misrepresentation of the Bengali culture and thereby Indian culture to Indians, other Indians, and also abroad? So I really don't feel in any way coming close to the characters or the movie, and I don't know.
I think,
I can sorry.
yeah, just a second. I think Swaralipi is not speaking for Anvita Datta or for the
Oh yes,
film.
yes, I see her point. Absolutely, I see her point. I
I think,
agree that she is
yeah, and I
critiquing
think
the
it's
whole
perfect.
making of it. I like that.
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
I
and I
am
think it's
actually agreeing with her.
perfectly fine to introduce a film that is provocative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessarily something that we all agree or whose ideologies we share. I think it's in that spirit that
Oh, yes, yes.
Swaralipi
Her
has.
presentation did have all these points, of course.
Yeah.
I am actually agreeing with her. I am just asking this question to her, as a Bengali, if she liked it, that the misrepresentation of the culture,
No.
to other Indians. So,
I did not like it, to be very.
yeah.
I mean, see, the thing is, what made me think about the film, and that's why I wanted to have the discussion, because I wanted to have like a session where we can all talk about how this film appeals to us in different ways, and whether we are taken away in terms of the appeal of Bengaliness, or whether we get to what the film might be trying to convey. It's quite interesting that the film does not use any of the Bengali folklore that are there, that are part of like stories. I'm not talking about the folklore. There are
Mm,
several stories which can be taken up for cinematic adaptations. The story doesn't do that. The story takes certain intertextual elements which will be easily identifiable. That's why when I'm talking about consumable bits of Bengal. So,
Yeah.
this is something that will fascinate somebody who's is going to look for like a pill size consumable Bengal to take in. But then there is also this aspect of violence that is disturbing. So how do we
mm,
negotiate something of that
Yeah.
sort? So
Yeah.
you want to turn off your sensibilities and just watch the movie and just move over. But at the
mm,
same time, you are so deeply moved. I mean, I was very deeply disturbed by the rape scene, which I thought was very, very, haunting. So, how do we negotiate these two things? Like, on the one hand, it is giving us a very, tableau kind of a, presentation of Bengal, just in a nutshell. Some of the things that the audience is already familiar with. It's not introducing anything new or anything layered
mm.
about Bengal. Definitely.
Yeah,
Right.
Nandini first, and then Tarakeshwar, and then Sanjay Kumar has also raised his hand. Yeah,
Yeah, no, actually, it's interesting that one can select films that one doesn't particularly agree with or like to discuss. Um, um, but somewhere, I don't know. I mean, I think that that becomes that much tougher, right? So then one tries to figure this out. So when I saw it, I'd seen it earlier. I don't know. I guess it was all those fancy costumes only that made me stick on, because I really dislike the film. I think it's very badly made, and I think it's really rubbish with all those kashpool and all in the end. But you're right that there's a kind of fascination. My sense, I'm a little, I don't think I can completely agree that it's about showing Bengali culture. I think that this actually disturbs me a little bit, because I don't think it necessarily shows Bengali culture. And as a Bengali, I respond. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, right? I respond to it in a particular way, and others could possibly because it's showing a very specific. One is to me it's feeding into certain registers of Bengal, images of feudal Bengal. It's feeding into that. It's not necessarily feeding into Bengali culture. This is my view, because this is not a culture that I can even identify with, frankly. Okay. And I think that it's mainly those images that it kind of, so immediately, as you know, the question of the brother-in-law will come in, and you'll think of, you know, the brother-in-law trope. You know the way in which the child bride, the way she's dressed, the way you know, the dalan and everything. Those are all like registers that kind of are there, but it's not necessarily Bengali culture. To me, it's a kind of register that exists, and that the kashpool also comes within that kind of frame, in my view. So I think that it is something that, to me, because you know, so the other point was the question of the violence. To me, I don't know whether I would actually see the violence sort of almost as a counter. I mean, as versus the Bengali culture. After all, it's feudal. I mean, all societies have been very violent. I mean, there's never been a lack of violence. And in fact, right in the beginning, when I first started seeing it, I thought it was a story on Pulmoni Dasi, actually, to tell you the truth. And I mean, I didn't even realize it's about, you know, this kind of thing. So I think it becomes very difficult when we're actually seeing this. And I tend to agree that this whole Netflix thing, it's very interesting that it would choose a film among so many other films that could have been made, perhaps, which actually brings in this element of this thing. And it's very pastiche. So anyway, in short, I just think that I'm not in complete agreement that it's about Bengali culture as much as certain registers. And those registers to me were very extremely superficial. So it's the way she's dressed, and the way, you know, the you know, the Thakur Dalan and all that stuff. I mean, it's all like, you know, the tropes, and it kind of feeds into that. And then I don't have a problem with the violence. I obviously have a problem with the way it's been you know, done, a lot of it. But apart from that, then I don't see that dissonance. And finally, as a Bengali, I think I would react to it just as anyone else would react to it. I mean, I would at least see it that way. So, I mean, when one is watching a film, is when we're watching films or discussing films that we may not necessarily agree with, what position do we put ourselves in? You know, I mean, this is just a question that struck me as you were speaking about. It's interesting that we're taking it in this kind of a direction. But yeah, so that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, Tarakeshwar?
Yeah, I think somehow the discussion we had of towards whether it is authentic Bengali or not, I think that is immaterial for many of us who are not Bengalis. Yes, there might be stereotype type of certain things that come as part of the film, which a Bengali can take offense to and say that this is not true representation of Bengal. And no representation is true in that sense. So there's no point in talking about the authenticity of the representation. You need to focus on the politics of representation. So in that sense, even the argument that is it trying to sell the exoticized Bengali film, Bengali region through this film? I don't know because suddenly I did not come across to me as a showcasing of Bengali culture at all. Even until Swaralipi pointed out the context, the folklore stories that exist in Bengal, and the intertextual elements uh, within the Bengali literary and filmic traditions, it was completely absent when I was watching it. So for me, it was basically Yes, it has to be located somewhere, both in terms of time and space, uh, because you can't create a completely uh, imaginary space and time in writing. But in visually, it's very difficult to do that. So you need to locate it somewhere in the region, and also you need to give it a particular time. And how do we know that it is what time it is? Certainly, it is not pre-modern Bengali culture. It's a colonial Bengal. But interestingly, in colonial Bengal, the colonial administration or the colonial state is absent. But we know it's colonial Bengal because he is going to England for further study. So he has to obtain certain documents, and for that he has to go to Calcutta. So Calcutta already exists, and certain administrative framework exists, but it is absent here, except in the form of a police. And that police is also completely incompetent or is subservient to the local power. So because she is wielding the power at that point of time, he is simply listening to her version of the story. So to that extent, the police who could represent the colonial state is with the local Takurani, because she is actually wielding the power at that point of time. Only when this fellow comes back from his studies, he expresses doubt about the kind of agreement that exists there. And he tries to uh, use his rationality to unmask it, but actually, even he fails to do that. In the sense that he also agrees that yes, there is a chudel because you have not done it, and he can't expect that a woman could do it. So his studies or his upbringing has told him that it could never be her, because image of her in his mind is completely different from what she is today. Though he has doubt, he attributes that to a bad influence from outside, not to her. And so his focus is on him. So in that sense, that is a very delicate thing that is happening there. So there is it is a colonial period. It might have been set in Bengal, but it could as well be any North Indian or even to some extent South Indian thing. Oh, that's the point. But what we need to discuss more is more about how this focus on the gender, because as you said, it's a horror genre, and horror genre is also veered into some kind of soft porn, where there is a rape and it's shown explicitly, and then she takes a revenge, and then she becomes Durga or Kali for taking the revenge. This is a very common uh, narrative that we come across in this horror come soft porn genre. But here, bringing that folk, superimposing it, and here, though the rape scene is horrifying, even the way it has been portrayed, it might uh, shock you to some extent, but it is not pornographic in that sense. Yes, it shocks you. So there is no soft porn at all in this particular thing. So it is taking this horror film genre, shedding the soft porn, but focusing the question of gender, especially the issue of it may not be feminist. So we don't have to look for feminism here. And even they are claiming they are not claiming that it is a feminist movie. Please watch it. So there is no question of whether it is a feminist or non-feminist. That is a different issue. Let us look at the question of gender. So the gender issue is focused, and the main issue within the gender is one, uh, the social age and the physical age. So what society expects you to perform, whatever your physical age is, certain responsibilities that you have to do, or certain behaviors that you need to express, if you call it a social age, and then the physical age. So there's a tension between these two uh, that comes out in different form in the movie. So the narrative focuses on this tension and what it leads to. And the entire story is about that. But interestingly, this folk coming in there, and then this question of gender and the conflict between the physical age and social age, and the result what happens in a particular uh, society is something that it is uh, trying to draw our attention to. So in that sense, it is not completely horror because there is no mystery there. It begins as a mystery, but somebody who is trying to find it out, who is a lawyer, was just trained and come back to the city, trained to treat. But we halfway through, we know what is happening there. So it is not horror, it is not detective, and it is not even soft porn. It is not completely folkloristic too, in that sense, where it tries to exercise, but using all these elements, uh, it is trying to uh, place certain issue in front of us. We might discuss those issue and how the power plays through it in that context, and how this gender comes through that is something that we need to discuss rather than discussing the authenticity of the locale in which they have tried to anchor the narrative.
Yeah, thank you, Tarak Kesar, for that intervention. Sanjay Kumar had also raised his hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I also saw it as representation of feudal India, as the story starts somewhere in 1890s, and it's very convenient to place it in Calcutta because Calcutta was the capital of India at that time, and it will be more believable if the character goes to England to study law and he comes back after 5 years. So for all those reasons, filmmaker probably decided to place it in Calcutta. Otherwise, it could have been anywhere else. As far as the story of Chudal is concerned, like this exists everywhere in India, and there can be some local variations. As far as this inverted feet is concerned, that's also, I think, present in different parts of India. Um, but what I was interested in is actually what Geeta was talking about, this collaborative fiction. When we see the name of these two characters, Satyajit Thakur and Bulbul Chaudhary, these are the two names which figure on the book. When Bulbul is tearing pages out of the book, and finally she burns it. So interestingly, these two surnames, like they are Thakur and Chaudhary. Okay, so in that sense, Indranil could have been Indranil Chaudhary. Okay, not necessarily Thakur. And Satyajit Thakur, Satya is named as Satyajit Thakur. That's the full name which is mentioned on the cover of the book. So Thakur or Chaudhary, it doesn't matter much because all the same, Thakur is a form of address, not necessarily surname. But we find this collaborative effort happening when both are young, before Satyajit leaves for England to study law. That the book represents two different perspectives. One seen by the world seen by Satya, and the world seen by Bulbul, and they are not the same. And every Satya is saying that, whatever in the chapter I write and forward it to you, you make it horrific. So that is her vision, and in a way it gives us a glimpse of what is going to happen later on in the film. So that reminded me of some of the collaborative fictions happening even in India in 60s. Rajendra Yadav and Mannu Bhandari, both of them, they wrote a novel which is titled as Ek Inch Muskan. And Rajendra Yadav, their husband-wife, both are writers. Rajendra Yadav is a big literary critic in Hindi literature, and Mannu Bhandari is also a very well-known novelist. So they decided to write this novel, Ek Inch Muskan, in which one chapter is written by Rajendra Yadav and next chapter is written by Mannu Bhandari again, and that also depends on the character. So if so male character is there, so Rajendra Yadav is is giving that perspective, and female character given by Manu Bandari. And in the beginning, we see that Satya is telling the story, this horror story, when they are sitting in this palanquin. What do you call that? They're yeah, after the wedding, she is going to her in-laws' place. So and she is also interested in horror stories. She's okay. So is it a horror story? And then she is listening. And then later on, that comes as the form of a book, when both of them, they decide to collaborate to write one novel. But as Geeta was saying that she abandons this project because Satya has left for England. So I didn't think about that aspect, but at least one perspective is lost because Satya has left. So then finally what remains is horror, and we see the horror in the film. And child marriage, though it is there, I didn't see much effort to contextualize it. Though in our society, even arranged marriage is also a form of child marriage, because finally the agency is not with the boy or with the girl in the wedding. So in that sense, if parents decide, then it is as good or as bad as child marriage, because if you cannot decide your partner. But here the difference is that the difference of the age. So the groom is very old, aged, and almost, I don't know what is the difference of the age. At least it is not stated in the film, but it can be something like 30 years. But that aspect is not much discussed in the film, that once she gets married and she comes to her in-laws, then in what circumstances she was married, who were her parents. We see one auntie. So with that, I don't know whether her parents are alive or not. But somehow she is forced to marry like that. And I also found it odd, as it has already been pointed out by many people, that woman is either forced to be a goddess or a demon. So these are the two choices which are presented. And Vinodini, somehow I was expecting her to be more like, developing kind of sisterhood by being more sympathetic to her sister-in-law. But she again shows signs of jealousy rather than sisterhood, which I found a bit odd and disturbing. So these are the reflections about the film. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sanjay Kumar, for bringing out that very interesting point about that story, the collaborative fiction, and what remains in the end. Also, with regard to Tarakeshwar's point, I think it's well taken. I mean, location, the choice of locale for a film, when Shyam Benegal or Gautam Ghosh want to make a realist film, during their the heydays of parallel cinema, Telangana is a chosen location. So it's like a location is needed to stage, let's say, a certain kind of feudalism, and so Bengal 1880s becomes the chosen locale, whatever be the politics of that choice. Anyone else would like to come in? Otherwise, would Swaralipi want to say anything at this point? Yeah. Yeah, Jayant, please go ahead. You've unmuted yourself.
No, I didn't want to say anything.
Okay, fine. Swaralipi?
Yeah, all the points that were mentioned were things that I think we all will agree upon. One thing that we need to keep in mind is that this film is not aiming at realism at any cost. So, I think in a way it is deliberately unrealistic because this conflict between, this modern educated man is also very well staged, which shows this, this conflict or this contradiction that we see, that he tries to understand everything through his modern scientific rational perspective, which is not happening. Even the end of the film is so kind of like muddled in a sense. I mean, it doesn't give us a very clear understanding of whether she actually died, or she had died and become a witch, or now she is a spirit and a ghost. So the ending also is left hanging there in a way. Uh, as many people pointed out regarding the question of authenticity and the question of whether we can see it as something that is trying to replicate the times realistically, that you know uh, that again in the context of a folk genre is something that we need to consider, because usually when we see folk tales being projected or presented, the whole idea is, again, as I just mentioned, about defamiliarization or taking it away from realism. Uh, there are definitely problems in the film. And when I suggested the film, I told Nicola that this is a problematic film. But there are things that we can talk about and that would form interesting takes for a Bengali viewer. How is the film appealing to? For a non-Bengali viewer, because I definitely wanted to see how non-Bengali viewers had watched this film without, as Takesh was pointing out, that without going into the intertextualities or the cultural references, I think, as just a story of once upon a time. If we understand the film in that way, how does it appeal to us? Does it draw us into this aspect of discovering Bengal or looking at the the visual aspects of Bengal, or does it take us to the core of the violence? Because one thing that the film gets right is the violence. There is violence happening in various forms, in various layers, and in various garbs, because even the apparently suave, apparently educated, apparently modern man is an extremely violent man before. So do we reach the core of violence in that sense, or do we get lost in this quagmire of these cultural things that are thrown at us? So I wanted to get that perspective, because as a viewer, I I mean, as much as this Bengali thing kind of like I mean, I absolutely abhorred that exoticism that came in the film. uh, I could reach the elements of violence. So this balance as a viewer, or this dichotomy as a viewer, how do we kind of reach there? I mean, do we get lost in this aspect that are visually out there in the film, or do we get to see the layers of violence? Even for child marriage, the scene that I had put a screenshot of, the scene where this bride is sitting there and she is obviously sexually not ready for any kind of consummation, and then we see this almost a man, almost at the age of her father, entering, and the shock that you get, because for a long time even the viewers don't know whom she is getting married to, because the first male character that we are introduced to is this young boy. So just like any child marriage, our assumption is that, okay, fine, this young girl is getting married to this young boy. So violence is something that is thrown at us in different forms, in different degrees, I would say. Uh, but do we reach there as viewers? Do we get violence? We are not talking about retribution. We're just talking about the aspect of violence and the different kinds of violences that are being portrayed in the film. Or do we, the visual aspects are so overwhelming that we really don't get there? So this is something that I wanted to have a discussion on, because it was a disturbing experience for me to watch the film. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to defend the film in any way, and I think that this is a film that is made to appeal to popular audiences. who might not get to the root of the violence. That is the point that I wanted to make, that there are so many things that are there to distract us from the core of the violence. And eventually it has happened. Our discussion has gone off to those elements rather than the violence that is there, because they are very distracting and disturbing. The ones that are there on the surface in terms of the visual appeal of the film. So somewhere the violence which could have been brought out in a more in a way that it could have reached a popular audience, that kind of gets lost. So there's a lot of potential of representing that violence that could have been there. But it kind of ignites and then leaves it, just touches on it and then leaves it. So it doesn't go to the root of it, because the film is so invested in showing something that you enjoy watching in terms of how the film looks like. I'm not talking about critical watchers. I'm talking about common watchers, viewers who would not invest so much into thinking. I mean, they would just take this film as a weekend watch it and get past it. So, where does the film come in that sense?
Yeah, at least I think in terms of how a childhood playmate and then as young adults, a co-writer, collaborator, a defender in the household for this young woman. When does he become her lord? I think the violence of that is very well captured in the film. When does he feel that he owns her and that he has the right to direct her, rein her in? I think that violence is something that comes through quite strongly and poignantly in the film, at least for me. Yeah.
Yeah, there is also this brief moment of sisterhood that
Sure.
we were talking about immediately after the rape scene, where Binodini, who was coming across as something who's a villainous character, suddenly we get to see that she has gone through the same violence, and it is left unsaid. We don't really know what happened to her apart from her getting married to this very strange. The representation of this mentally challenged Mahendra also is something that is very disturbing. Because I mean, that is not how mental health should be represented in a way. Mentally challenged people should be represented, but he comes across as this, I mean, again, that element of violence that is embodied in him, where he constantly refers to Bulbul as a playmate, as a not even a playmate. He wants her as a toy. Gudiya, gudiya. He keeps on saying that. So Binodini feels a connection with Bulbul because she feels that Bulbul has been, uh, served equally badly in the whole context. But that is a very brief moment. Again, we go back to a point where again the power dynamics come between the elder sister-in-law and the younger sister-in-law. She is the Badi Haveli Saturain, or the mistress of the Haveli, and Vinodini remains at the bottom of the ladder. So that's what I mean. There are brief moments which could have been transformed into better moments where we could have taken the message. But again, the representation part of it is something that distracts us. I mean, that's all I can say as the final thing of the film. It is very distracting.
Yeah. Any other points to make? Anyone else? Uh, if there's nothing else, I have a small little request from all of you. I want you all to please, if possible, turn on your videos. I want to take a small a picture of all of us together in gallery view. Geeta and I are writing a short article documenting our lockdown experience, particularly our cinema viewing and cinema discussion experience. So this is like a solicited, a commissioned essay that we are doing together, which is going to be part of an e-book, I think. So we also want to have a photograph of all of us there as part of that essay. So if it's possible for all of you, if you don't mind, please switch on your camera and your videos so that I can take a picture over here to incorporate it into the article that we are doing together. Okay.
Sorry, technology has failed me. How do I make myself visible?
You need to click on the video symbol.
Yeah, done that. Yeah.
Yes, there you are. Yeah. So, is that all? Okay, there is Kalpalata. And Chandrasekhar? Okay, Chandrasekhar doesn't want to be visible. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so all ready? Thank you. One more. Yeah, thank you all so much. So we're just documenting TFO, Talking Films Online, Geeta and I. So hopefully, as soon, I mean, I'll share it with you. It's an article in Kannada, but I can kind of share the summary with all of you when it's done. Yeah. So we have reached the end of our discussion of this film Bulbul, suggested to us by Swaralipi. Thanks, Swaralipi, for a wonderful discussion. I know it was a hard role to play, and I don't think it was one you were intending to play at all. That is, as someone defending the film. But I think you also brought out a number of issues in your presentation, and also later on in the course of the discussion about some of the interesting aspects that one can still draw out from the film and talk about. And thanks all again for the wonderful participation, for all the points that you made. We'll meet next week at the same time, 9 o'clock, with another round of discussion of yet another interesting film. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Good
Bye.
night.
Bye.